Welcome to the first in a series of videos showing how to create a scenario. This series will be called the Scenario Project. We'll cover map creation and also using a QB map for your scenario, unit selection and groups, plans, group orders and AI triggers, setting up strategic, operational, tactical and text for your mission. I will not show the whole process as we go through it, just enough to explain how to do things. I'll also show you how I approach testing, and finally there will be a battle of me playing the finished scenario. This will be a meeting engagement, and for the purposes of this video series I will be playing the Soviets, and so we'll only create plans for the Germans. Each video will be approximately 30 minutes long, so because of this, if necessary, if one subject goes over 30 minutes, I will split it into two logical videos. So what do you do if you just don't have the time to do a map, or maybe even it just does not interest you in any way? Well, what you can do is to choose one of the QB maps, or even load up one of the scenarios and use that as a basis for a map, or actually one of the master maps you can cut down, and that is true for all the maps actually. You can just cut them down or increase their size and fiddle around with them. Here we are in the scenario editor, and let's say we want to choose a quick battle map, so we click on the button and let's just pick one randomly like this. Okay, now say we've looked at the map, let's zoom out slightly, and we think, oh yeah, that looks good, and I'm not going to go into it now, but you've looked at the 3D preview and you are happy with it. This is the one you want to use. Now the very first thing you need to do, and this applies if you're going to cut down a master map or if you're going to use a scenario, the very first thing you need to do is to save it under a different name. And the best thing to do, I find, is if you prefix it with 00, so it's always at the top of the list when you go to load it in, and then you have a prefix and then a name. So call this my QB map. And then what we do, we want to, because we're in quick battle maps and we're doing this as a scenario, and so I'm going to chuck this into the scenario folder, and there we go. And now we can do whatever we like with this map or the scenario or the master map, and we won't affect the original. I do advise against starting to change it thinking, oh well, I'll just save it under a different name when I finish. It is best to do it this way. Now the second thing is that what you want to do when you do the designer's notes, as you can see they're blank here, you really want to include the name of the original map or the name of the original scenario you're using the map from, and the person who originally created it if known, or just put unknown there, just a mark saying you've tried. It's just it's common courtesy. Okay, so that's it for using a QB map. As part of this introduction to this series of videos, I thought what I would do is to actually go over the editing controls, and especially in terms of what I'm going to be using. This is a default size map, 320 by 320, and you have the controls to adjust the size, and if you see here on the width, the controls are paired up horizontally. For depth, they are paired up vertically. So if we do the width, first of all, you can see if we, on the right hand side, we increase it and it's increased. Here you just hit the negative and it reduces it. And for depth, again, it's just positive to increase and negative to decrease. It's fairly simple. You can see that the map has been set up with a random selection of basic terrain types. We can zoom in for more detailed changes that we want to do, or if we've got a very large map and we want to see overall what it looks like, we can come all the way out. Now if you want to see how the different terrain types look, what I suggest is this is the paintbrushes and this is the very large one. So if we just do dirt quickly like that, you can see the next one down, do clover, next one down, and of course the final one is just a single. Okay, let's just get rid of this. If you wanted to look at the different terrain types, and you can set this up as a map and just call it a special name. You can see dirt, dirt red, and so on. And you just go into the 3D preview and you can see what they look like. So we've got all the different types of terrain, and we can use the brush to paint rather large areas. One thing that I do like is the light forest. Let me just show you that. And the reason I like it is without the trees, it's got that very rough texture and look to it. If you use heavy forest tile, then armoured vehicles can't move through it. Got different types of water, including the new reeds. Deep ford, the armoured vehicles do not like moving through deep ford, although men can. Shallow ford, men and vehicles can move across. Water, no one can move across. You've got gravel, dirt lot, ploughed fields, and all the other different crops down here. Brush is another interesting one, which I'll show you when we get down to craters, which can give a nice little rough texture. Foliage now, you've obviously got the different types of trees that you can look at, and this is where again the paintbrush comes into its own. So if we do say just single ones here, double here, and the most dense forest here, and this one with the grid effect is what you'd use to create an orchard. So just to show you different types of trees, how they also looks. And we're going to go into the 3D preview. So the reason I've done this is because if we look at the first set of trees, you can see the first block, they don't look very thick. The middle density, that's quite a thick trees, and obviously the third one is a really thick, dense forest. Then here, as you can see, it's a nice uniform setup for the trees for creating orchards. And again, we've got one of these new sets of trees where the foliage is much higher up, and you can see that you can get away with a lot denser trees if you still want to have a higher level of visibility. Roads and railways, now this is a more interesting one to look at. We can as you can see that we've got the different directions for the roads. Now you might be turning around and saying, oh, what's the difference between some of these, but it's down to the detail of the little markers. We've also got the link tool where we can just click and click, but you've got to consider that this is very crude. Use it to give you an idea of where the road you're going to put, and then you've got to work on tidying it up. Now when I say tidying up, and this is probably quite a good example, if you notice here it doesn't look very nice, this turning, and let's do this actually with paved road, that would be better example. Going to 3D, and you can see the connections there. They do not look nice, very tatty. The road drawing that you do have isn't great, but you've got all these extra little bits and pieces which can make it look better. So how does that really work for us in, say, cleaning up this? And it really does depend on whether you want to have something look good or not. So let's go paved road because that's the most obvious one, and let's do line, and then we're going to go diagonally down. Now the way we might do this, and from afar that looks fine, but once you get closer in it doesn't look so good, and especially when you go into the 3D mode and actually look at the road itself, you can see it looks pretty horrible. So this is where these extra little boxes etc coming. So what we could do is click on this one. You can see it's a straight going down to a corner and go down like that. It's better at the top, but it still doesn't look good down here on the inside of the road. So how can we get round that? Now what we need is, you can see this is just a horizontal piece of road, and you've also got these other two horizontal piece of roads, but they've got a little piece extra down in the corner. That's the lower right corner and upper right corner. And if we choose this one and replace this straight road piece, now go to 3D, you can see that the inside of the corner and the outside of the corner is smooth. Okay, so the inner part doesn't look great, but it's smooth. You might not be too bothered about it, but it just makes your maps look a lot nicer. And when you do railroads, and just by the way, you don't have the tool here available for railroads, that can make all the difference. But you've also got something else you've got to be careful of with railroads. If we do this, and let's do this, and you can see this is actually a split. You've actually got points there, whereas if we do this and this one, you can see it's a curve. So you've got to be careful about that, and then use the appropriate other pieces to carry on. So you can see that's a obvious right turn on a straight, but that actually fits in nicely with this points tile. So, and also down here, whoops, What you do is use this one to get more of a corner, and that looks nice. So you need to experiment and be aware of what you've got to have a nice looking railway track. Takes a little bit of effort, but some people don't realise, they just skip over these little bits and they end up with tatty looking cornering and points, which could look so much nicer. I mean, it's not 100% great, but it can look a lot nicer if you start experimenting and being aware of what all the different pieces do. Walls and fences, it's the usual thing, but if we go onto the walls, you can see we've got the drawing tool available to us. Again, you want to be aware of what all the different pieces can do. You've got some nice ones where you can actually go straight along. If we flip over, you can see if you want to do a left upwards turn there, then you can start doing diagonals. Whoops, that does happen, you've got to be careful of that. Then you've got gaps that you can create. Carry on. So there's plenty of things you can do. It's not the most marvellous thing, but it's quite comprehensive. Okay, so modular buildings and independent buildings. What is the fundamental difference between these? Well, let's show you. Independent buildings, houses. Okay, 3D view. Right. Okay, so rule number 1 with buildings: do not place independent buildings next to each other. They are detached buildings. The problem is that if there is a doorway, troops that go inside this building can go into this building without having to come outside. With modular buildings, they have to come out and go into the next building. So avoid attaching independent buildings together unless you specifically want to do that. If we just go through some of the commands, if we control left click, you can see we are getting bullet marks and damage. And also on the roof. Okay, so if we do shift left click, can take a little moments for it to come back to me. You can see we can change the look of the whole building. If we hit Control Shift and left click, we can start going through balconies. Now if we do Control Shift on the ground floor, we can do the whole side of a building. Now if we do Alt left click, you can see we're changing all the windows. Alt Shift, you can see we've got damage in the roof, then the next floor and the next floor, and finally. I'm not going to spend too long on flavor objects. So barrels, you've got 6 different types of barrels. Down here it tells you how to change rotation, etc. in the 3D preview. You cannot change them in 2D. In fact, you can't see them in 2D. It's a bit awkward, but just to quickly go through, you've got Control will rotate an object, Control click will delete an object, Shift click will move an object 1 meter away, Alt click will move object freely. So be aware you've got all the instructions there. You've got various different types of flavor objects, and as you can see, we've clicked through, they don't necessarily all have 6 types. There's quite a few there, actually 9 for Farm 1, Farm 2 has only got 3. Craters, and this again is where you can actually use the paintbrush. So I'm going to be flipping in and out of 3D preview for this. So let's just go into 3D. You can see we've got them all here, and looks pretty good, doesn't it, the craters? But it does look very green next to them, which doesn't maybe not the. It might be realistic. I don't know. I've never been to war, but it doesn't look good to me. So I come out of this. We now go to ground. I'm going to choose dirt. Just crudely do it like that. Now, to save a bit of time, I am going to do all three. So light forest, I'm going to do down here. And the other one is brush. But oops, sorry, I'm going to do dirt as well. So I've got dirt as the underlying tile, and then brush comes on top. So now this is the first one where it's got that right, haven't I? Yep. Where it's just dirt as the base tile with the craters on top, and that looks okay. It's not too bad. Bit heavy on the dirt though, doesn't quite look realistic. Now you can see when we start using the dirt with craters and the brush, looks a little bit better because it doesn't look so much as everything's just been absolutely obliterated. And then we have over here using my favourite, the light forest, which I'm not saying is better than that, but you know what I'm saying is, if you don't like a default combination, try things out, see what you come up with, and you can come up with something that you like, and you can use different combinations for different circumstances as you want. Elevation. This can be a little bit tricky at first. I tend to use direct, and certainly when I build the map, it's the one I will be using all the time. Adjust all. Now, it's important to kind of read the instructions. Don't worry so much about the E key toggles elevation display in all modes. You only really you'll use that when you're using one of these ground or other types of modes. So at the moment you can see here we cannot see what the ground level is, but if we hit E, it pops up. Okay, so adjust all, let's come up slightly. So it's all 20s. So if we hit adjust, and as you can see it says plus or minus to raise and lower. Delta height for clicking is 5. So the delta 5, if we use the plus and minus, we can actually change the delta. But let's leave that at 5. So, as you can see, it says click to raise, shift click to lower. So if we just click on the middle here, you can see it's gone to 25. It's a hard point, as I like to refer to it. And everything else around it is 25 on the map, because I haven't got any other hard points. So 25 here. Now if I go down here and I hold shift and click, that's gone down to 20, and you can now see there's the 20 point, and as we go up towards the 25, the numbers change, the elevation changes. So if we go to adjust all, and I just hit the plus, you can see all of them raise by 1. Hit the minus, and they all go down. And that's all the hard points, and then it's adjusted in between. Now I like to use direct. So, and it's quite simple. I can just paint a line of hardpoints. Obviously it's all set at 20. Now using the plus and minus keys again, so I set this to 25. Now majority of the map is 20, but now I've got a 25 marker here, so there's a rise here. So if I go down to 17 here, and then I can come back up 21. It's all adjusted, so rather gentle slope there. Got more steep of a rise down here where we've got a much higher hard points. Landmarks. Put a building in. This is fairly easy. So I just click on a point, so let's click on the building. Asks me what name do I want, and let's just call it a HQ. Click OK, and we've got a little red marker on the 2D. You can see it's called HQ. Should have done that a little bit different. To get rid of it, just click on it and just hit delete. Simple as that. Setup zones. So you've got axis 1. Again, you can use the paintbrush. Got axis 2 and axis 3. There's just a couple of little points to do with these setup zones. So what I've got here is axis 3 setup zone is around the building, and it's also here, axis 2, axis 1. When I put any troops down in the setup zones, the player cannot move those troops outside the setup zone. This also means that if you put troops in the general playing battlefield area, they won't be able to move them. Now you can use that for fixed positions like fortifications if you want, because they come, fortifications etc. come within the unit purchase. So if you specifically want, which is something we are going to do actually as part of the scenario, is actually have fortifications in fixed points. Now what this also means is for axis 3, any troops or anything here I can also place here, and vice versa. Any troops etc. that I've got in axis 2 though cannot go into this setup zone. Just something to be aware of. Bridges. Bridges are a pain in the neck, especially the railway bridges. So what we're going to do is just a quick demonstration of an ordinary road bridge, a wooden one. Now you can see you've got two different types. One's where you can see the bridges, and ones with little crosses through. And the ones with little crosses through are destroyed bridges. So you've got two different flavours of the same bridge. Let's come up here, and what we're going to do is have a dry riverbed. Just to show you what they look like, we are going to use this for the different positions. We're going to have one here and a broken one here. As you can see, this is our ordinary bridge, and this is parts of the broken bridge, and it's all pretty flat. In principle, what you have to do is anchor the ends of the bridge. So now we start going to use the elevation. And let's get that down. So we're going to anchor the ends. Now the riverbed is going to be lower than obviously the sides, but we want to also, if you like, anchor the banks of the river. And I'm going to keep this simple by just keeping it at 20. Okay, now obviously the riverbed itself is going to be lower, so let's make this 15. It's quite a big chunk. So let's, if you can see close in, we've got 20s for the sides, and it's going to be quite a steep banking. As you can see here, we've got pieces of the broken bridge. Not seeing too much. As you can see over here on the bridge, we can only see this one set of supports and then parts of the other, because the bank is quite close. So to start to change that, we can have a more direct effect by having more hard points within the riverbed. Now, as you can see, we are already now at the stage where we are at the edge of the bridge. Now, if we went further, just to show you, you can see a rather heavy inclination, and it just about still works on the road. We'll actually put one in just to show. Use dirt road. Let's take that so you can see the difference between the two, the way it looks. And that doesn't look too bad, a little bit high up, but that's quite nice. You do notice that you've got a little bit of a, and it looks worse actually. I should have done the paved road coming down here, so it would have looked very much like a paved road. On here you can see it kind of ends, so you do need to do something. Possibly this gives you more of an idea of when it comes down. You can see the road just goes down and it can look rather nasty. So here, if you remember, I put a dirt terrain tile, and that doesn't look too bad. Overall, it doesn't look too bad, but you can get lost in getting the bridge just right. It can be frustrating, so be warned. And that's it for this little introduction to using the editor.